We wanted to be able to actually offer like Bunnings snags on the weekend. This Week in E-Commerce, episode 126, and back with me after a 1-week hiatus is Alex. Alex, welcome back.
Hello. Hey, Mal. I was just thinking, it feels like it's been a while. It's only been 1 week, but that just speaks to how fast everything moves.
Tell me about it. Obviously, you had a wedding to attend in Sydney the other week, hence why you were unable to make it. But in the meantime, so much is going on, including our not so good friend Senor Trump with his latest moves, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But it's a huge week at the moment in retail because, as I mentioned to you right before we hit record, it is Pokemon Day on Friday.
Have you been counting down?
No, I haven't. I just have some clients who are involved in Pokemon Day, so it's a very big day for them. Otherwise, I'd have no idea, but it then has sparked to my radar the fact that there's a lot of Pokemon collaborations going live this Friday.
Yeah, well, it probably makes sense as to why you're seeing all of that now. Well, that's exciting. I'm glad to hear brands are jumping on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you? What's been going on in the world of Alex Ross?
It's just been a really busy start to the year. I know I keep on saying that, but we're nearly at the end of February now, which is crazy. Lots of conversations around just how product discovery is changing, how we can get away from seasonality and sale and things like that and just have more reliable retail periods throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's some of the conversations I've been having as well about how brands don't rely on those peak moments to make the bulk of their revenue, but how do we actually kind of smooth that out more throughout the year as well, just for more predictable cash flow, which is ultimately the dream.
Yeah, exactly. We're all about being a sustainable business, sustainable growth, I think.
That's right. All right, we're going to dive straight into things. And our first quickie is TikTok have walked back their need to fulfill with TikTok. So they started off by saying that by February 25th, you had to have switched to fulfilled by TikTok, their FBT, or I think it was another option where you had to use one of their preferred fulfillment partners in order to continue selling on TikTok Shop. Now they have walked that back last week to say that that's not going to be the case anymore, and they're going to allow you to continue to use your own seller. That's a pretty big reversal, I think, from trying to build the Amazon of social shopping to now just say, actually, do you know what? Just go on your own.
Well, Amazon's a good comparison there because they offer both Amazon fulfilled and then merchant fulfilled. So for TikTok to go so hard and go, if you're on shop, we must fulfill that order. I think that, they're walking back because it's a very strong statement and it's a big, it's a big step for brands to take in being part of that marketplace.
Yeah, I think Amazon, when they started doing it, and even like up until, when they first launched in Australia, it wasn't mandatory to be on Prime. Like, not that it's mandatory now, but there's so many benefits when you are, when it is being fulfilled by Amazon and you've got that little Prime badge on there. Whereas when you look at social shopping, it's so small in comparison. It's barely 2%, of total online sales. That's not really moving the needle for too many people. And to force people into making such a big move, it scared a lot of brands I work with off, who were just like, actually, you know what? Maybe we're going to stop using TikTok Shop because it was just getting too onerous with what they were asking for when it was representing such a small part of their overall revenue.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it just, it pushed players out that had larger inventories. I can see it making sense if you stock 3 face masks, for example, that's an easier proposition. But if you're a fashion business or any business with SKUs and size curve, it's just, it's a massive hurdle.
Yeah, and also like losing control of that post-purchase experience as well, particularly for such a nascent product. It's a lot to give up when you're already losing control of so many places. Like, I get it from TikTok's point of view that they want to control as much of the value chain, make as much money as possible because their ad business is not doing as well as Meta's. But I think it's just a little bit too much to ask when they're still trying to prove themselves as a platform.
Yeah, 100%. I think they should focus on releasing TikTok Shop in Australia first.
I think I've been hearing that every year for about 2 years now. And I keep hearing rumors. It's coming, but I don't know whether that's actually the case.
Yeah, they said this year, hopefully.
I heard that last year too.
Yeah, thinking about brands that sell globally and to have that infrastructure set up for the US and the UK, but not in Australia and all the other markets, really, it's hard to scale where you've got different, availability in different regions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, our second quickie is the ACCC have announced what their 26-27 priorities are. And according to them, they're going to be focusing on 5 areas. First being consumer protection enforcement. Second being misleading pricing and promotions, which we've talked about a lot. Unfair contract terms, competition in digital platforms, and small business protections. Alex, I think this is a pretty good move. It's hopefully, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the size of the fine and whether it's actually going to be a deterrent to any of these brands. But this is obviously coming in parallel with the court action against Coles at the moment with their pricing strategies. So look, I think this is definitely something which every retailer needs to be paying attention to. We just need to make sure that we don't lose the consumer trust like we've been talking about for months now.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody wants that bad PR moment. I think that it's obviously great ACCC's continuing to kind of keep the pressure on. I think that we saw so far anyway stories than we expected off the back of Black Friday and peak retail season last year in terms of what ACCC found and got reported by consumers. So we'll have to see if this changes anything. But obviously with what's going on with Coles at the moment, everybody's pretty vigilant.
Yeah, well, I think, and it's interesting because I think that was only 2 months ago, and I think some of these investigations can take months to happen. So
It's
I'd say
true.
we're probably not waiting till like June, July before we really see the full extent of that. But
Yeah.
my hope is that more retailers were kind of playing ball and not trying to do a dodgy on their customers. But who knows? There's always going to be a few bad actors out there.
Yeah. And, and it's when they're not even trying to do a dodgy, but they've just got really complicated discounting terms and you're trying to get that all into one story on an Instagram tile.
Mm.
And that's where the oversimplification can then be misleading. So, yeah, I think you might be right. We'll find some more stories coming out in the next few months, but hopefully not.
Yep, we'll see. We'll see. All right, and the next quickie is that Bunnings today have launched on Uber Eats. They're going to be launching with 30,000 products available. And I got to say, Uber Eats probably needs to change their name now from being
Yeah.
Uber Eats to being Uber everything, which it kind of is. And every week there's more and more different diverse retailers now on there. So, they've been expanding outside of just food and grocery for quite a while. But this is a pretty big one, with Bunnings
Yeah.
offering the same pricing as well as in store.
I think it's we always talk about Bunnings as being very convenient. They've got an amazing store network. You can get in the car and drive 10 minutes in any direction and kind of go to a Bunnings. It's not going to change my life. I don't need anything that urgently, but I can see some place for it, I suppose.
I definitely can, because I have been caught in that situation before where you need a certain thing. You need like, a certain tool or tape or anything like that. And you have to get in the car and make that trip to Bunnings when you're in the middle of some sort of DIY project, like when you're
Yeah.
building IKEA furniture, for instance, right? So I think it does have that need. There is that same day I needed the next hour sort of thing, which it does cater to. So I think it's actually a really good move. Like I can't imagine someone going in there and doing like a massive shop on there and buying like floorboards or a toilet or something like that. Maybe they will, but I just can't see that happening. I think so, but it really plays into that more quicker convenience place. So there's also the question around like, is this just going to be margin dilution for Bunnings because they're just going to have to pay Uber that extra percentage? But I don't actually think it stops that. I think it actually helps that because you're not going to get the same behavior on someone buying through Uber Eats than you would them actually going into the store. And it just helps support the brand narrative, if anything.
Yeah, that's really true. I think it's just a different type of shopper in those moments in that convenience play.
All right, well, maybe I might have a use for it this weekend. I'll have to spin up some sort of DIY project and see whether I'm missing something and have to use Uber Eats.
I think as well, like, when you've got kids running around, it's the weekend. I get it, not being able to pile everybody into the car to go get that one screw that you're missing. So I totally see where that's coming from.
Kids love trips to Bunnings. It's actually a problem because they never want to leave. So that 15-minute trip is like an hour by the time you factor in kids.
You know what I'd love to see? Instead of a tip kind of option, there's like you want to get a snag as well with your order, and then you
Yep.
over the snags as well. That would actually swing me in that direction.
Look, back when I was working at Uber, that was one of the things we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to actually offer like Bunnings snags on the weekend. I can't actually remember why we didn't end up doing it, but that would have been a game changer.
Yeah, well, that's awesome.
All right, and our last quickie for the day is that eBay are going to be purchasing Depop. So Depop, Gen Z's favorite fashion retail marketplace, have just been acquired by eBay, which is fantastic news because you're kind of seeing this whole recommerce market starting to consolidate, and eBay kind of figuring out what their position is as well. And I get the sense that eBay are undergoing a little bit more of a resurgence, particularly around things like collectibles and other different categories like that. So this for me just makes a whole lot of sense for eBay to be buying them.
Yeah, definitely I see the alignment there, and they're obviously kind of pros in that existing category. They're not overextending themselves too much. I love Depop, so I don't want to see the platform change too much. Whereas eBay is all that about like verified merchants, and there's lots of businesses on eBay, whereas Depop is really focused on that consumer that's got 5 items to rehome type prop. So we'll have to see if they make any big changes or if it's just going to be BAU, because Depop's absolutely thriving and everyone loves it.
Yeah, look, and that's where eBay started. That when eBay started, that's all you had there, but then it became much more professional.
Exactly.
Okay, we're about to go into our deep dives, and our first deep dive is the one we alluded to at the top of the call, which is that the Supreme Court, let me try that again, has overturned Trump's global tariffs. Now, as you would have heard, last year was a bit of an absolute barn fight when it came to the tariffs because no one knew what was going on. And just when we thought things were settled, the Supreme Court have said that Trump's global tariff framework was actually illegal, and he didn't actually have the authority to implement that tariff regime across different countries. So while that at face value seems like good news, Trump has now turned around and introduced a new set of tariffs, a flat 15% global tariff on all imports into America under a different law, which he claims to be able to have. So this is actually slightly worse for Australia because we only had a 10% tariff. Now we have a 15% tariff, which I think for a lot of Australian exporters is going to really impact us when it comes to things like, apparel, electronics, beef, which is one of our biggest exports to the US.
Yeah, and it's always going to be turbulent over there, but it felt like we'd gotten to a place where there was a bit of reliability. We know what was going on. So for all of this to happen, it's just probably giving some brands PTSD of what they went through last year. Hopefully the 3PLs and what they've set up has kind of given them a bit more of a buffer with that 5% difference. But I don't think anybody wanted it on their bingo card this year.
No, I certainly wasn't expecting to see that over the weekend. So it is still very early days and they're still trying to work through everything. So this is probably an opportunity for us to get Justin or Stuart back on the show to kind of dig through this a little bit more. But it does introduce, again, more volatility into the market right at a time when I think domestic consumer spending is really low. And I think a lot of businesses are still struggling to regain the US market share, which they lost when the tariffs first hit mid last year. So I think, those brands who already had those plans in place in terms of looking at their US warehousing, diversifying country of origin to be able to avoid some of the harsher tariffs, they might be in a good spot. But I think for everyone else, it's almost kind of resetting where they need to be now to figure out, okay, well, how do we deal with this new regime?
Yeah. And just that diversification piece of not relying too much on any one market, making sure that you're protected when there are moments like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, and we're kind of already starting to see that in a lot of places, like with Europe, for instance. Europe doing more trade with other European countries as well, but also China actually picking up a lot of the market share as well. There's a great chart which I saw the other day, which showed markets and where there were more US or more China leaning. Where if you go back 10 years ago, the majority of markets were very heavily US leaning. But then now looking at the last 12 months, they've actually all flipped now. And so many of them are now very heavily China. And some of them are just more internal, like the EU with other EU countries. So it's going to be interesting again, like, how this is going to continue to play out and how long this lasts for. Because the other nuance to this new tariff as well is that it can only last for 150 days before congressional approval. So in the next 150 days, Congress needs to approve an extension of it. Otherwise, this could also be struck down. And who knows what's going to happen after that. And I wonder how many laws there are which Trump can continue to enact new tariffs until he runs out of laws.
Yeah, it's just retaliation after retaliation at this point.
Yeah, it's getting a bit crazy. It's getting really crazy. But in the meantime, everyone, hold on and let's listen to the experts and see what they have to say, because there's a lot more to come with this particular story.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, our second deep dive is on Lovisa. So Lovisa have reported a sharp downturn in their shares following the disappointing results from the last quarter. So from what we can see, their growth was definitely slower than what they had predicted, but also suffering from quite a lot of margin pressure as well. And off the back of this, their shares took a massive tumble, about 30 odd percent, I think, in a matter of a couple of days. So you can see that, with brands like this, like Lovisa, who aren't at that premium end, they're definitely more around that fast fashion type, costume jewelry type end. They're going to continue to struggle in this because I think a lot of the market is moving away from them. They're losing market share to the bigger, more nimble, cheaper players like the Sheins and the Temus, et cetera, of the world. That business model of just continuing to bring in newness when you can't clear it just puts so much pressure on your business.
Yeah, and pressure on the business and pressure on the margins to what you just said before, like just always in that never ending sales cycle for sure.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, how long business like this can survive for in their current guise before they actually need to reset. And I think structurally, that's kind of what I'm looking for at the moment with brands who are going this old way of doing business or this way which we have historically done it. It just doesn't work anymore, and you need to rip it up. You have to kind of rip up that playbook. Otherwise, you could end up in this death spiral, like we've seen so many other brands, like the Mosaics of the world, kind of get themselves caught into.
And they have such a large store network, so many overhead costs when it comes to that. And just as we've seen in the last 18 months, it can typically make a brand just slower to move. They're less agile. I wonder as well with like the cost of gold and silver all increased. Well, not that I think all of these products are 100% gold.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not using gold or silver in their products.
I do have like gold plated earrings from them or from their like premium range. 1-2% can always hurt. So I wonder if that's impacted their margin pressures as well.
Yeah, I'd have no doubt it would be. I think a part of it as well is like last week I spoke about barbecues galore, and I think one of the strategies which people didn't expect was the fact that I think it was intentional to actually take them to tip them into voluntary administration by the new owners, Gordon Brothers, because it was a way for them to be able to shed all the dead weight from the brand. And Lovisa is still a very well-known brand, publicly traded, etc., but maybe in their current format, not really able to show that growth which a market wants. So maybe this could be an opportunity to actually for someone to take them private again, shed all that dead weight, and relaunch the brand. Particularly since in this current age, which we're seeing in retail, with all the downturn in consumer confidence, we're talking at least 12 to 18 months of more consumer pain because they're predicting at least 1 or 2 more rate hikes over this period, which is never good for consumer confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, to your point, it's got a lot of brand equity, the brand Lovisa, like it's a big investment. So hopefully they start making the right steps.
Okay, and our final story for the day is the counterfeit crisis, which is currently in retail at the moment, where a recent study showed that 78% of brands are losing at least 5% of annual revenue due to counterfeit products. Now, this is a massive number, and we've talked about this before in the past about the scourge of counterfeits, particularly through the rise of AI. But it seems that it's not isolated to Australia or a few small players. It's actually an industry-wide problem, which is looking like it's only continuing to grow as well.
Yeah, I want to shout out. I think it was Jess Rufus, founder of Number Two, for this kind of article and putting this on my LinkedIn feed. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time. So to get those stats of 78% of brands estimate they lose around 5% of annual revenue, it's good to actually have that kind of quantification because we've seen this, we've spoken about it with Shein ripping off newfound businesses, but also how this has impacted like the luxury market as well. So it's one of those problems that doesn't seem to matter the size of the business. It's affecting all of retail.
Yeah, and it's something which is actually happening a lot more. Like if you go onto Reddit, for instance, people are openly selling counterfeits and actually wanting to buy counterfeits as well. There's brands like G'd Up, for instance, like every new drop, within a couple of weeks of a new drop, you can buy the counterfeit version of that online. And people are just quite open about the fact that, hey, I'm selling a knockoff of this particular style, but it's like $50. And people are happy to pay that. So even like with Veritas, which is the other story this was linked to as well, which has recently raised a $1.75 million pre-seed round to tackle the counterfeit luxury market through authentication of the products. You wonder whether people even care anymore about that, how much that actually matters to the majority of consumers who just want to put that brand on themselves.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like when it comes, the price point is king in that position where if you think you're paying for genuine products, that's different to buying a knockoff or buying a dupe, if you will. You're accepting that low price point and that it's a copy of and not the real thing. But it's definitely, it's interesting how that dupe culture and accepting that you don't have the real thing, but it's close enough is becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah, look, I think there's quite a few reviews of different bags as well, with people saying, okay, it's knocked off that style, it's knocked off that style. It's unavoidable in the fashion space because that's what people do. Something becomes fashionable, everyone copies it, then you've got a whole lot of dupes out there. So I don't think it necessarily addresses every customer, but there's always going to be that percentage of customers where this is actually super important to, but also for the brand as well, to be able to say that actually, do you know what? You can actually still authenticate our products. And that's a great thing about, brands like, Maison de Sabre, who I work with, also Chief Nutrition as well, where they do provide that provenance, I guess, where you can actually see where those products have come from. And that just helps to maintain and establish that premium positioning where, you can actually track where this product has come from. You know exactly where the tanneries are, all the different factories who work with us. And that's why you know that we're good quality and we can charge this higher price point.
Yeah, exactly. And then giving you the ability to, let's say, use Depop to resell that product at a high price point because it's that quality and it's verified.
That's right. It all comes full circle. Yeah, but I think that the scourge though of the counterfeits is only going to increase. Like we've talked about before with counterfeit stores, AI knockoff stores just being built very, very quickly and starting to sell product, whether the product exists or not, is dramatically on the rise as well. And we're seeing more and more of that in that space. And even with more ads, which I see from products where I look at that going, hey, that's pretty cool. That's right up my alley. I'm always thinking twice now about how legit is this? You're having to go through those extra steps about how many reviews do they have? How long have they been in business for? Are there other people who are actually wearing the product? It's making online shopping much more difficult than what it used to be 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. And we're all having to go through the trust exercises that we went through 5-10 years ago when e-commerce was just getting big.
Yeah, and I wonder whether that's another opportunity as well to actually have some sort of trust mark on your site to be able to say that your site has been verified by this other source, which has confirmed that this is a legitimate business, which has been around for like 5 years. They're headquartered here. And you just make it easy for customers to do that. Sort of like, when you have the, when you go to a website and you purchase and you just look for that lock in the address bar, because it means it's secure. But whether there's something like that, which someone could do.
Well, it's taking us back to original Trustpilot days, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, and I think trust, like we talked about before, it has never been more important. And going back to the ACCC and what they're really looking at, fundamentally, every single thing which they're focusing on this year is all about consumer trust. So maybe that becomes the competitive advantage for brands now, that it's not about, your colors or your products. It's about the fact that people can actually trust when they buy from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that is all we've got time for this week. Alex, any closing thoughts before we wrap?
I want to start planting the seeds of Retail Fest. It's in early May. I know that they are opening up free tickets and travel reimbursement to qualified brands. So I know it's one of our favorite e-commerce conferences of the year. So start thinking about, those travel dates and if you can join us.
Yeah, well, I will definitely be there, and you will be there too, I'm sure. Maybe we can even record a podcast there.
Yeah, well, last year you did a podcast or an interview day, didn't you?
No, not last year. So I always do that online retailer. But Dylan did ask about recording a podcast, so maybe we'll reach out to Dylan and see what we can do.
Yeah.
This time. But from my side, we have not this week, with the top 50 people in e-commerce awards night on Wednesday. So really excited to see who is going to take out that crown this year.
I'm excited for that. Fingers crossed for everybody. That's a great moment. That's going to be exciting to wake up on Thursday and see who made the list.
Yeah, and we'll let you know all the winners next week if you don't read it somewhere else beforehand. All right, that's all we got time for. Thanks, everyone. Keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling, and we'll be back next week.
See you next week.